Hey, everybody, welcome to a new episode of Walk in Faith. I'm excited to be sitting down with a good mutual friend, Dave Haberer, to talk about his new book, How Did I Get Into This Pit? Dave, thank you so much for taking the time. And a fellow Brooklynite, I appreciate your time today.
Welcome. I'm looking forward to this. Call tells me good things about you.
He's a wonderful man. So thank you for putting us in contact. So I was looking through your book, very interesting, especially during this time of year. And I think this is from Amazon. And I just want to read this description. It says, life has its ups and downs. The ups can be wonderful, but the downs can be devastating, especially when one of your downs turns out to be a pit. Many people suddenly find themselves in the depths of almost unbelievable desperation and despair. And it says, how did I get there? They ask. And I was listening to today on before this interview a lot about Joseph, and we're familiar with Joseph's story, but there are people out there that aren't familiar with the full story. If you can condense that and just give us a little bit about the story and what sort of inspired you to write this book.
Okay, the storyline is pretty simple, but it's deeper as I get into the book. But it's basically Joseph has comes from this dysfunctional family. His brothers hate him. It goes back to his father marrying four women, and it's just a mess. The brothers hate him so much. He has a vision from God that he's going to rule over them, which just ticks the brothers off. So much so that they want to kill him. They're out doing their working in the fields. The father sends Joseph to check on him. They see him come and they say, "Let's kill him. We'll put some blood on an animal. Tell Dad he got attacked by an animal." One of the brothers says, "No, let's just throw him in a pit," hoping to rescue him. But while he's gone, the other brothers see some traders, some Ishmaelites come, and they sell Joseph into slavery. So Joseph then goes from slavery into Potiphar's house. At Potiphar's house, he does well until his wife accuses him of rape. Then he gets thrown into jail. In jail, he meets some of Pharaoh's workers, his baker and the cupbearer. He interprets the dreams for them. He ends up in Pharaoh's house. Long story short, he gets to sit over the distribution of the famine, of the food set aside during the good years for the famine, and takes care of his family, takes care of the Egyptians, and takes care of moves the plan of God forward. God promised to Abraham that they would be a mighty nation, and this is another step forward. So there's a lot of complex things going on in this simple story that lots of people know about, but I don't think deeply enough about.
So yeah, I mean, like you said, I think a lot of people don't fully understand the story. And one thing too, I mean, there's a lot of things interesting that I was listening to today. I mean, I know the story, but to really listen to and dive into it, one thing that was interesting too was that Joseph knew the gift that he had, right? Was one of the gifts was to interpret the dreams. But when he was willing and allowed God to use him, but also like he knew that the gift wasn't really so self-serving, was more to fulfill God's plan. I found that to be so interesting, but also too, like when his brothers threw him into the pit and then they sat there and had lunch, like as if it wasn't a big deal. But when I took that story and I looked through your book, and you realize how relevant Joseph's story is and how we can apply that to what we're going through in our life. And then there are people that say that the Bible is not relevant. I
Right.
always sigh when I hear that. But it's very interesting, and there's so many practical things in the book. Can you tell us about some of the sort of the life lessons that are inside your book?
Well, there's a couple of things. I think the beginning is the messed up family. I mean, I've been in ministry for over 40 years. So I've run a lot of times I've come to realize that most families on one level or another is dysfunctional. And when we get in those situations, we wonder, can God use me? Can God in this bro? And Joseph's not a good son, right? Joseph is the favorite son of the favorite wife. And if you look at the story early on, the wives just battled together. Now I have a son. Now my husband will love me. Now I have a son. They give their concubines to Jacob so that they can have children. And his favorite wife, Rachel, doesn't get pregnant, right? Until Joseph. And then once Joseph is born, Jacob falls in love with this kid, gives him a special coat. Kind of, he's a bad father in that he does not share love equally to all his children. He has a favorite, and that comes out clear in the family. And the one thing that unites the family is their hatred for Joseph. So people come in broken families and they wonder, well, can God use me? We have this idea that God needs perfect people to do his will, and he doesn't. God takes broken people, doesn't take the best. I mean, Jacob is not a good, he's a liar, steals his brother's birthright. His son Joseph is not the greatest son, but God uses these people for his purposes, and submitting to the will of God and trusting him and knowing that God uses the foolish things of this world to confound the wise. I think is something that should encourage us. And then the story progresses from there. And I think Joseph understands his calling in that he's got this vision from God. But like all of us, I think he really questions at moments when his life goes from bad to worse. Did I really hear from God? Right? What do I do in this circumstance? And I think that one of the things we need to learn that there's two plans, the way I see it. There's God's overall plan that's going to get us to glory, stand around the throne of God, every tribe and tongue. But then there's our life experiences that God uses for his ultimate purpose. And so for Joseph to be able to save his family, save the Egyptians, and move the plan of God forward, he has to go to jail. And so we lose sight of the fact that my life, I might go through difficult times, but God is in those situations working for my good and for the good of his redemptive plan. And so I might have to suffer for a greater good. And I think we lose track of that. We think we're going to give our heart to Jesus and everything's going to be fine. No, God's going to save the world, right? And he's going to use me as part of that. And some of us will rule and reign in Hebrews 11, and some of us will be sawn in sunder and despised by the world, all in accordance with the ultimate plan of God that we win, And so Joseph ends up in a good place. At the end of the story, he can say, what you intended for evil, God intended for good.
Wow. I mean, you
But we
said
got to get there.
so many things. And you're right. And you think about how many people that have these visions or, let's start from the beginning, right? A lot of people that come to Christ, like you said, they don't realize there's gonna be such adversity, right? And then a lot of times they can't overcome that adversity or they question God and say, why is this happening to me? I'm a good person. I'm a follower of Christ. And they give up. And that voice is so loud that comes to us, right? But then also too, when you discover your gift, right? God has given me a gift and then I have to, or God's plan, I know what God's plan is, but then sometimes I have to ask myself, is this selfish desires? Or is this truly from God? Am I trying to manipulate the situation? Am I trying to fulfill my purpose when in actuality, I say it's God's plan, but it's really not. It's my own selfish desires. And all of that comes to us. And think about how many stories where God has revealed his plan or his purpose, but then we take a different road or we give up, right? And Joseph was so strong in his will. And like you said, too, he wasn't perfect in the beginning, right? He was probably arrogant in the sense when he went to, talk to his brothers or he had this clipboard. He was sort of, speaking to his brothers and reporting back to the
It was
father.
father, right?
He probably wasn't. But then, too, I think about, too, and you said about how he had a loving father, right? Maybe his father wasn't the best father because, I mean, I only have one son, and of course he's my favorite, but I couldn't imagine sort of favoring one over the other. But in the same aspect, he had a loving father. So you
Right.
think about all that, and it's such a fascinating story. It really is when you break it down that way. And in your book, like I said, I just turned to a few things, and I was looking at this last week, and I'm like, it's like Jeopardy. I'm like, okay, what am I facing right now?
Right,
Like,
right.
and how do you relate that to Joseph's story? Like you said, like fear, following God's plan, that voice. Like in this book, it answers all of that. These lessons are all in this book. It's fascinating.
The interesting thing it's a struggle for him because he's being conformed to the image of Jesus, right? He's being sanctified, right? At the end of the story, when he finally gets into Pharaoh's court, he names his son Manasseh and Ephraim. One means God has brought me to a place in a strange land, right? He's brought me prosperity. He's got a wife and children now. And the other one is he kind of rejects his family, says like, I'm done with them. And so he's going along. People are coming to him. He's handing out the food. One day he looks up and his brothers are there.
Hmm.
And now it's like, what do I do with these guys? Do I punish them? They ruined my life, right? Do I punish them or do I save them? I'm the only one that can save them. And that whole thing of sending his brothers back and getting Benjamin, I think he's wrestling with what do I do with my brothers, right? And it's not until Jacob dies, then the brothers say, well, Joseph has been good to us because daddy's been alive. But now daddy's gone, he's going to get us. And they go and question him. And it's at that point, and he doesn't let them off the hook. He doesn't say, don't worry about everything. He says, look, you got to deal with God. But as far as I'm concerned, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. But it's a process of him wrestling with the uncertainty. What do you do when he's in the, I just had a vision from God. Now I'm in a pit. Now I'm being sold into slavery. But God spoke to me. Did I hear God? What's going on? And I think those are the struggles that we face in our
Yes.
life. Like, what is God doing? And he says, trust me.
How do we gain that trust though? Because it happens to me, right? I'm working on a project, I'll be personal. And years ago I had this vision of this project. And I said, this is from God. And then time went on, I didn't see any movement, and that voice comes and says, maybe you misheard him, you're not good enough. The
Yeah,
voice of defeat. But then I have to go back to, I was like, no, I know this is from God, right? And I'm strong in my faith. But it comes to us, it comes to you, David. I mean, it comes to all of us. So, like, what do you lean on personally when that happens?
you lean on the promises of God, right? The promise that in every situation, God is working together for my good, to those who are called to, who love God and are called according to his purposes. That's the promise of God. I'll never leave you or forsake you, right? And we have many illustrations, right? You got Abraham who says, God says, you're going to have a son. And then years go by and he gets old. And then he comes up with another plan. No, that I didn't say Ishmael. I said you're gonna have a son. It's not till he's 100 years old that Sarah gets pregnant. Moses is sent to be the deliverer of the people, and he's got to walk around the wilderness for 40 years. Um, we don't grab hold of the fact that God is in control and moving things according to his purposes. So God tells tells Jacob, Joseph rather, he tells him, you're going to be ruler. He gives him two visions, but he doesn't tell him how he's going to get there. And that's our struggle. God tells us the end, but he doesn't tell us how to get there.
Exactly.
So we're going to get to glory, but we don't know how we're going to get there, right? We want to know. We want to know all the particulars. And God says, trust me. But if we hear from God, then he's going to work out, his sovereign will is going to work out the particulars to get us to where we're going. Joseph he had to go to a specific jail. He had to go to the jail where Potiphar had to buy him, because he had to go to the jail where Pharaoh put his prisoners. Couldn't go to any jail. He had to go to a specific place because he has to meet Pharaoh's cupbearer so that he can ask him, when you're out, remember me.
Yep.
He forgets him for 2 more years. 2 more years he sits in prison. This guy's life never gets better until it gets better. Until it finally God says, now, and it falls into place. And then he can look back and say, oh, you were leading me the whole time.
Yes, I think that's so interesting too. Those 2 points. One is I find it interesting that he told, because when he he had that dream, right? It was the cupbearer, right? He had the dream, and Joseph interpreted the dream, and he said exactly what you said. Don't forget me when that opportunity comes. I found that to be interesting that he said that, because a lot of times we don't, like, I won't even say that to someone that I've helped. And
Right, right,
when you get to that position, please remember me, right? Because of pride or whatever reason, we
right.
won't actually ask for help. And it's interesting too when, like you said, when you see the end and the beginning. And I wonder if God revealed the journey. How many of us, like if he would have revealed to Joseph, how many of us would have turned around and said, you know what, God, this is not what I signed up for. I
That's
want
right.
the
We don't.
easier path. But it's like you said, it's like on the journey, there are moments, even like for me, I'm like, God, show me a sign. I'm like, why am I asking for a sign? Right. So that shouldn't prove to me that God is holding my hand, because if I believe in his word and his promises, therefore I don't always need a sign.
Right.
But it's that journey, that
It's a journey.
struggle, but when I look back, I say, it's made me so much stronger, right? I'm able to overcome such adversity. And if we want to reach, if it's Potiphar's house, or I want to reach the pinnacle of whatever that is in my faith or in my journey,
Right.
I have to go through this long, uncomfortable road. It's not easy. It is not easy. And it's books like this and stories like this that we can relate to. When I look at, like you said, I look at Joseph and say he was thrown in the pit. He had so many opportunities to get back at his brothers, so many opportunities to give up, but he kept pushing forward. He kept his eyes, as I would say, on the cross. But
Yeah.
obviously there was no cross at the time.
And at every point when he gets to the new normal, he does the right thing, right? He gets sold into slavery. He's taken to Egypt. He's sold to Potiphar, and he's a slave to Potiphar, but he's a good one. He does the right, and Potiphar puts his house over him. So every time he gets to the place, it's like, this isn't what I expected, but God has me here. I'm gonna obey God because obeying God is the right thing to do, not because it's the profitable thing to do, right? I might not get out of this, but this is where I am. I'm going to serve God. When he gets into prison, the same thing happens. He's a model prisoner, and the guard puts the other prisoners underneath him. So there's a sense that as we go along this difficult journey, wherever we find ourselves, we need to settle down and serve God to the best of our ability. When it doesn't make sense, and when we don't know the end result, we have to serve God.
So how do we apply, let's say, like reconciliation, right? Especially now during the holiday season. This is the time where we're with family and friends and people that we're at odds with, and how do we sort of take Joseph's story and then apply that to our lives?
I think the interesting thing about Joseph is he doesn't let the brothers off the hook. They did things, and they have to deal with God, right? So he doesn't say everything's. I don't worry about what you did. He leaves that to them and God. But what he does say, and what we can do, is say, I don't hold anything against you, right? You have to deal with yourself. But as from me and you, we're fine. I understand what you did. Whatever your intentions were, God used them for my good. And so there's no animosity, there's no hard feelings, there's no grudge, there's no seeking of revengeance. I rest in God, and I set you free, and you now have to kind of deal with God yourself. We don't have the ability to forgive in the sense that God forgives, but we can say, we're good. Things between us are fine. I don't hold anything against you. I forgive you for what you did to me. Now but he doesn't set them free from their responsibility to God. And I think we want to get it perfect so everybody comes together. We can't. I can only deal with how I respond, and you have to deal how you respond. But as far as we're concerned, from
Mm.
my perspective, we're good.
You're right. And there is such a freeing and this power of this peace that comes over you when you're willing to sort of reconcile or forgive someone. Even if, I mean, you've probably been to funerals too, where, there's people are at odds and another person has passed away and they're like, and they don't even talk to each other. I haven't spoken in
Right,
30, 40 years over something that, they manifested and they created in their mind that probably never even took place. And now they have these 30, 40 years of time that they missed out on, right?
right.
And you see this all the time. Families are divided, and I definitely believe that that's the work of the enemy, right? Destroy the
Yeah,
families.
absolutely.
But I taught my son, and he's only 8, right? There's such a power in forgiveness, being able to forgive someone, to take the high road, as I like to say, explain it to him. There is such a freeing sort of this feeling that comes over you, and like you said, I mean, we could only do our part, but it's interesting. And then there was another question that I like too. It was, what do we learn about the central role of faith in the story of Joseph? Like that's a great point.
We're holding on to God, right? My faith is that God is sovereign, that if God is God, he has to know everything, has to have all power, and has to be ever present, right? The 3 attributes of God. So God has got to be in this. Jesus promised he'd never leave me or forsake me, right? He never promised that it would be easy. Actually, he told me it would be difficult. They hated me, they're going to hate you. And Paul promises that whatever situation I'm in, God is in the midst with me, working together for my good. So faith says, I believe what God says as opposed to what I sense and experience. And that becomes difficult because we live in this casuistic relationship, right? Something happens and then there's a response, right? So we do something, somebody does something back. That's how we figure out and go through life. But God is behind the scenes doing something completely different. And so I'm trying to figure out life based on my experience when there's something that I don't understand happening beyond my experience. that's more important than my experience, actually directing my experience, leading me further into my walk with Jesus, right? So he's trying to get us to, he's going to get us to glory, right? That's the hope, right? How he gets us there is involved with the whole redemptive story of the plan of God. So it's not me and Jesus. I give my heart to Jesus and me and Jesus. No, Jesus saves me into the body of Christ, right? So I'm saved into this bigger plan that God is using each of us to accomplish his ultimate good of bringing it back, the redemption of creation. Um, and and I don't see all those particulars, right? But I do see two things. I see the call of Christ, and I see we win, right? And I had a friend that used to say when he read mysteries, he always read the last chapter first so he knew where the story was going. Well, we know the last chapter, we win. So all this process of getting there is a trust that what God said is true, right? Now, I might not feel that. I might not think I'm experiencing that. But the reality is, God is moving me to his appointed end. And it's good, right? We need to remember that it's good. Um, so, faith is holding on to God in the midst of the, my tagline is when life is not understood, we can trust God.
Mm.
Or when life is unknown, we can trust God. So that, I mean, that's the test, right? Do I trust God?
Interesting. So how have you applied some of the things like while you're writing this book to your own sort of family dynamic? Has it helped you with some,
Well, it came out of a sermon I preached years ago, all right, and it just resonated with lots of people. And then, through my family and my ministry, this whole struggle of situations, we find ourselves in situations where we say, I really screwed up and I deserve what I'm getting. That's easy, we repent, God delivers us. It's the situations in life that I don't know what's going on. Or somebody else did something and I'm suffering the consequences. Those are the struggles that I try to address. It's in those things when I'm the victim of somebody else's sin. Is that God? How do I hold on to God in all of that? And trying to get people to trust that God is really in control of all things, and nothing happens that's beyond His understanding, and we need to just hold on to Him when things are not clear. So with death in the family, why did this happen to this person at such a young age? Well, I don't know, and I can't answer that, right? And I've got to trust that God, who has kind intentions. I use this illustration. I think it's in the book as well. My father loved me, right? You love your son. You do anything for them, right? Whatever you can do to make his life easy, you will do, except that you are limited in what you can do.
Mhm.
God, it says he's my heavenly father. He's unlimited. So then why am I struggling? Right? That becomes the question. If God can make my life so I don't struggle and he loves me, why doesn't he? Well, there's got to be a better reason than God just wants me comfortable. He wants to cause me to grow and mature. And
Yep.
so you let your son get hurt sometimes so that he learns lessons, right?
Yes. Unfortunately, yes. But yeah, I'm definitely a helicopter parent, but I
Yeah, but still, there's gonna be a time he's
yeah.
gonna walk out the door, right? He's
Yeah.
gonna walk out the door and he's gonna be, hopefully he learned lessons, right?
Right.
But
Amazing. Amazing. So tell us now, where can people find out more about your ministry? I know you said you're in Brooklyn. Do you have a church in Brooklyn?
no, I have a church in Queens,
In
Trinity Lutheran
Queens. Oh,
Church
I'm
in Queens.
sorry. Not Brooklyn. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, me too. But it's a great church. So
Tell us where it is and how can we find out more about your
it's
book?
on it's in South Jamaica on Baisley Boulevard, Trinity Lutheran Church. We're there every Sunday, 11 o'clock. We can Zoom our services. So if anybody want to get in touch with me, they could do that, and we can get them on the Zoom list and do all that. Uh, Otherwise, I have you can look at me on Instagram. I have a Journey Faith Ministry is the ministry, and the email and the my Instagram account and those things are all on Journey Faith Ministry.
And where can people find your book? Is this
On
available now?
Amazon. Amazon.
Done.
Put my
Okay.
name in, or the title of the book comes right up. Can buy it on hardcover, softcover, or Kindle.
And I advise people to get it because even if you just scroll through it, and you just like I said the other day, I think it was patience is something I struggle with. I think everyone knows that, right? And I was thinking, I'm like, oh, it's right here. Oh, you know what? I had this last question. It was interesting
Sure.
before I end. When I was thinking about when Joseph or when Joseph told Pharaoh, right, the dream, why
Right,
did
right.
Pharaoh believe him, knowing that, he's serving a completely different God, and why there was that struggle, but yet Pharaoh believed him. And I was
Because
curious.
nobody else could give him any kind of information, right? He went through all of his whatever they were, religious leaders that couldn't answer his question. So I think it's God, he comes along with an answer, and I think God touches him and goes for it, right?
No, you're
Well,
right.
it's interesting. Just in the book, like all the stories are real people that that I know and have encountered. So it's all there's no made up stories in the book. It's all real people that
No,
have
and that's an
worked with.
interesting point if you think about it, right? So Pharaoh, right? To think that Joseph was able to inspire someone. So I think it reminds us that, that we can touch anyone, right? That we can inspire, we can impact anyone regardless of what they believe about us or, Jesus Christ, that we have the ability through God, through the gifts, through the Spirit to impact and inspire anyone because he could change Pharaoh's mind, Pharaoh's heart by interpreting a dream.
This is a
Amazing.
Jewish man, right? Who they don't like, right? That's why they live in Goshen when the family comes there, because the Egyptians don't want anything to do with them, right? He's just come out of prison. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why Pharaoh should not trust this man, except that the cupbearer said he interpreted my dream. You should check him out. So you're
Amazing.
right. God does great, mighty things.
Amazing. So, David, just one more time, just so it's clear, can you tell us the church that's in Queens? You said that was Lutheran
Trinity
Church?
Lutheran Church
Trinity
on
Lutheran.
17162 Baisley Boulevard.
Well, I advise people to check out David's book. Like I said, it's available on Amazon or visit his website or his church. Everything will be below in the comments. But great book. And I think this, like you said earlier, this is a book that we can all apply, especially during the season and beyond. And to understand the gifts that God has given us and to make sure we use them for God's plan and not our own. But David,
Okay.
thank you so much for this time. I really appreciate this conversation.
Thank you. Been wonderful. I really appreciate it. Maybe we'll see each other in Brooklyn someplace.
Yes, maybe we will. I'm in Brooklyn almost every day, so I will see
There you
you in
go.
the old neighborhood.
There you
Guys, I
go.
hope we can get something to eat if you don't mind.
That would be great. I love the food up there.
Yeah, there's actually a couple of really good pizzerias around there, which I love.
Love pizza.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Walk in Faith. Always remember you have the ability to inspire and evangelize through words and actions. God bless you. Take care.